While pondering topics to discuss, I came across this book. It's called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And I can say with utmost certainty, after reading this book, I am extremely confused. But I read it 4 more times, and now I kinda understand. Chapter 3 in this book stood out particularly to me. The chapters is about the tiny little gaps between the panels of a comic, and the whole implying the things that happen between the gaps. Because a comic book isn't like a movie. You have to do some assuming, since you don't see every single thing that happens, only what the artist wants you to see. And the first example he uses in this chapter is a short 2-panel excerpt, however you say that word, that shows a guy with an axe being ready to swing the axe at another guy. And then the next panel, it's a wide shot of a city with the guy screaming, the guy who is being attacked by the axe. But then something strange happens. The author, who I said before, Scott McCloud, he starts talking about what just happened. And he says, and I quote, "I may have drawn an axe being raised in this example, but I'm not the one who let it drop, or decide how hard the blow, or who screamed, or why. That, dear reader, was your special crime. Each of you committed it in your own style. All of you participated in the murder. All of you held the axe, and you chose your spot." Now, I don't know about you, but that quote raises a few questions, though it only raises one axe. And apparently it's an axe that may or may not have been dropped on that guy. Now, firstly, I'd just like to say, I actually do agree with his point that we don't know who screamed. Because this short comic example is only 2 panels. If there were more, it could be revealed that in the next panel, the person screaming was actually just a baby who was in a carriage around the corner. And it wasn't actually the guy who was being axed. But considering the fact that we only have these 2 panels to work off of, and the first one has the axe guy saying, "Now you die," it's pretty reasonable to assume that he wasn't raising that axe to cut a birthday cake. And while, yeah, I agree, we don't get to see how hard the axe fell, it is implied. In fact, in the next panel, he says, "To kill a man between panels is to condemn him to 1,000 of deaths." So it's confirmed that the guy dies. I'm not sure why he needed to ask the question, who swung the axe and how hard it fell. No. The axe guy swung the axe, and it fell hard enough to kill the guy. Well, actually, he doesn't ask who swung the axe. Instead, he asks, who screamed and why? Now, judging off of this, again, only 2-panel example, it's pretty much undeniable that the guy who screamed is the guy being axed, and he's screaming because he's being axed. And also, Mr. McCloud is blaming me for this heavily implied axe murdering, when he is the one who drew the thing. So if anyone's most involved with this axe murdering, it's him for creating it in the first place. And to confirm even further that this axe murdering did happen, in Scott McCloud's second book on the topic, called Creating Comics, he mentions how having words in a panel implies that that panel can only go on, logically, for as long as it takes the characters to say those words. Because then it goes to the next panel. And both these panels have words, so it's pretty safe to assume that between the guy readying to swing and the reaction to the swing, or the supposed reaction, that there was no time for the guy to get out of the way, and he's pretty much axed. So please don't blame us for your fictional axe murdering, Scott. With that being said, I love this book. And this whole is he alive, is he dead, was he axed, was he not thing, got me thinking about another famous thinking thought. And hey, this thinking thought was actually thought up from a guy who knew Albert Einstein. So you know it must make sense, right? And of course I understand the satisfaction of predicting what's going to happen based on clues given to you. So I'll give you one quick clue before I reveal this thought that I was thinking of. I'm talking about Erwin Schrödinger, of course. And this guy, Erwin Schrödinger, is famous for his thought experiment, Schrödinger's cat, among other things. But let's focus on the cat. If you don't know, a thought experiment is basically the scientific version of, whoa, dude, what if I put a cat in a box, and I put a bomb in the box, and, maybe the bomb explodes, or maybe it doesn't. Does the cat die? And that's not just a stupid example, that's the actual experiment. The experiment is, you put a cat in a box, and then either a bomb or a vat of acid that has a 50% chance of killing the cat. And then you close the box and you don't look inside. Is the cat dead? No one knows until you open the box. But is it the act of opening the box that kills the cat? Since there's no way to know if it's dead before you open the box. Is what Mr. Schrödinger suggests. Who knows if the cat's dead? Well, the cat knows, for one thing. So if you punch the box, if the cat's alive, it'll probably jump around and make some noise. If the cat's dead, it most likely won't do that. If the cat fell asleep because of how boring and ridiculous this experiment is, then that test might not work. But if the container starts dripping cat ooze, it's safe to assume the cat didn't make it. Why is Einstein and his buddies conspiring to liquefy a cat? To prove a fact that everyone already knows. But now that you know of that experiment's existence, you can probably see how I made connections to Scott McCloud's axe murder thing. And the whole cat experiment is something to do with quantum mechanics. But after talking about the Large Hadron Collider, I don't want to talk about anything that has the word quantum in it ever again. Besides, city large laser cannons are a lot cooler than some little kitty cat. Anyway, what did we learn today? Well, a guy who's really passionate about comics can make a better thought experiment than Albert Einstein's friend. This has been Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. But did you really enjoy it? Or are you in a state of existence where you both did and did not enjoy it? And the only way to find out is if you open the cat flap of reality. Nah, that would be stupid. Remember yesterday when I said thought experiments were really stupid? Well, they are. So that's why I decided to make one for myself. I know, I'm a hippogriff. It's been established. But is it really so hypocritical if what I talk about may actually be thought-provoking? I guess we won't find out, because what I'm actually going to talk about is pretty silly. So let's say you have a game. Any kind of game. Board game, video game, pen and paper game, like tag or something. So you have one of those games. And you want to be the best player that there's ever been at that particular game. But you also want to be the worst player at that particular game. How do you become both the best and worst player possible? Well, the answer is pretty simple. All you have to do is make a robot to play the game for you. Ugh, but unfortunately for us, we don't know how to make a robot. Well, that's just fine, because this robot is going to be the best and worst possible player. One of those is pretty easy to achieve, but how do you make something the best? Well, when you think about it, isn't playing a game just making multiple situational-based decisions one after another? Something happens, you react to it. Something happens, you react to it. And there are only so many reactions you could possibly have. So if your robot just makes random game-based actions, then there's a very, 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 very incredibly small chance that that robot will be the best player of that game. Of course, not all games are created equal. Some have a lot less decisions to be made than others. For example, tic-tac-toe, there are only ever 9 spaces you can occupy each turn. So if your robot places tiles randomly, and it's playing against an actual person, then there's a, I'd say pretty low, but still astronomically reasonable chance that the robot will win. Or I guess you can't really win tic-tac-toe once the skill ceiling is high enough, so really the only way to win is to draw. So there's still a decent chance the robot could tie you. Alright, maybe tic-tac-toe wasn't the best example. Because if you actually look up tic-tac-toe right now and play Google's version of it, there are 3 difficulty levels. Easy, which is incredibly easy to win against, medium, which is incredibly easy to win against, and impossible, which is, I'm pretty sure, impossible to win against. I mean, it says impossible, there's no hard mode. Tic-tac-toe is one of the few games in existence that really cannot be hard. There's no winning, just delaying losing. What's a game that's slightly more complicated than tic-tac-toe? Ooh, I know, Doom Eternal. Yeah, we're going from 0 to 100. This is a demonstration. Doom Eternal is way more complicated than tic-tac-toe. If that even needs to be said. In tic-tac-toe, there are only 9 moves, as I said before. Or actually 8, if the opponent goes first. But in Doom Eternal, there's like 30 different buttons you have to keep track of. Not to mention the fact that Doom Eternal has what tic-tac-toe could never dream of. Frame rate. Unlike tic-tac-toe, where you take turns, in Doom Eternal, there are no turns, even though turn is in the title, which is quite misleading. And that's true of any action game that you make a computer play, by pressing buttons at random, which adds infinitely more lose conditions than tic-tac-toe. What's your opponent in tic-tac-toe? Some lines and like a circle? Oh, that's not very threatening. What are your threats in Doom Eternal? Monsters? Pits? Spikes? Chainsaws? Flamethrowers? Explosives of various kinds? Tentacles that come through the subway and steal your sandwich? Lots of spooky things. That's a lot of things for one randomly generated robot to deal with. And speaking of that, the robot has to face off against other robots, because of the fact that now, in the far future modern day of video games, we have things called AIs. And while our randomly generated robot friend is an A, he's not necessarily I. So the AIs definitely have a distinct advantage over him. Our random robot is so much A, and not at all I, that when a normal person sees a bottomless pit, they think, oh, I should jump over this. Maybe swing off those monkey bars to fly across the gap. Or use that conveniently placed demon to bounce off of it into safety. While our random robot is thinking, how many ways and how many angles could I possibly throw myself into this pit, and how soon will it kill me? The answer is soon, very soon. But as I said earlier, randomness does not theoretically suck always. Only mostly always. There's still that astronomically slim chance that the robot will input every perfect input, accommodate for every amount of RNG, and absolutely demolish all the creatures of Doom Eternal in record pace. How likely is that to happen? Well, if you right now typed 0 point and then held down the 0 key for a solid week, and then just at the end of that week finally pressed 1, so you now end up with 0.0000000000000, etc. 1, that would still be incredibly generous for our robot friend. Just because something's theoretically possible does not mean it's feasible in the slightest. In the itty-bitty microscopic slightest. It's so unfeasible that unfeasible might as well just be created as a new word for this one specific situation. Yes, add a new definition of unfeasible. Doom Eternal random robot thingy. But you still might be thinking, hey, I mean, there's a chance. After it completes a level once, it'll never have to do that level again, right? So it'll just constantly be making progress until it eventually completes the game, yeah? Well, there's one thing I failed to inform you, that this entire time the game's been being played in one life mode. So if you die once, you get sent all the way back to the first level. Sorry if I didn't clarify that, I just thought it was assumed, because of how ridiculous this situation already is. So now we're free to add an extra spicy definition of unfeasible to the dictionary. Doom Eternal random robot thingy on Ultra Nightmare mode. And before I finish wrapping up, here's education time. Random robots kind of already have been being created to make perfect speedruns of games. They're called tool-assisted runs. And they aren't actually random. They're just a normal person aiding a computer in creating the perfect speedrun in a game. That may or may not be humanly doable, but that's the fun part, being able to do things that humans can't by going frame by frame and painstakingly inputting inputs. Actually, that doesn't sound fun at all, never mind. But still, respect to people who do that. I had no idea that Super Mario Bros. Could be completed 0.0001 second faster than it already could be. Wow, my mind's blown. So the moral of this theoretical story? No matter what you do, you will always be better than the average random robot Doom Eternal player. And those are words to live by. Granted, they're strange words, so here's some more familiar words. This has been Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. After finishing up the last rant, it got me thinking about some things. Like, why is orange the most difficult color to get on a color slider? Although that thought isn't really related to anything. It's just a thought I had after the last rant. Something slightly more on topic was, it got me thinking about big things. And I don't mean big things like big things. I mean big things like big things. Seems I'm not making sense. Here, let me make more sense than I did before. More being the key word here. I'm not talking big things, like hyperbolically. I mean big things literally physically. Lizically. Yes, I mean that actually factually, to put that frankly. And I don't even mean big things like bucket wheel excavators or LHCs, even though those are pretty big. I mean things bigger than those. Things so big that their measurement is really impractical and created pretty much specifically for measuring that one thing. I mean things that, it just now occurred to me that I often start off these rants just building up to the topic instead of just actually getting to the point. So here, let's get to that point. The point is, I'm going to be talking about big numbers. Yeah, big numbers. Numbers so big that all they do basically is measure space, even though there's already like a light years system for that. I'm not sure how that works, but they have their own thing. So yeah, it's pretty much only used to measure space and occasionally cookies. And of course, I've memorized the first couple of these numbers in ascending order, because I'm cool like that, which unfortunately makes me lame in most other aspects, but small price to pay, am I right? Yeah, it goes like million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, septillion, noctillion, nonillion, dectillion, undectillion, duodectillion, and that's about all I know off the top of my head. But that's about to change, because look what I brought today. It's a list of a bunch of really big numbers and their names, and I'm gonna look at it, because learning is always better than not learning. Yeah, everyone can't wait to go back to school to expand their cranial something or another. Yeah, let's take a list at this look. I'll just start off where I left off. Alright, the one after duodecillion is tridecillion, which, following the standard number naming procedure, makes sense. After that, it's quatuordecillion? Quatuordecillion. Why does it have two T's in a row? This is crazy, get a load of this word. After that, we have quindecillion, and septendecillion, octodecillion, which is a pretty cool sounding one. But then there's a novum-decillion? Novum-decillion? Novum?
Right here.
No, not you.
Oh man, it's never me.
And, yeah, that's number education, right? Actually, I think number education is called math, but there wasn't actually any math being done just now. So, yep, number education. That's what it should be called no matter what. And I guess now that the thing I wanted to do has been done, this has been Billy Not Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Sometimes inspiration comes from nowhere. I didn't ask for this, but it was just randomly implanted into my brain, due to circumstances of some sort happening. You could just be going about your day normally, when suddenly, bam! Remember that? Yeah. Something just happened that made you remember something. For a relevant example, I heard a song on a radio that for some reason reminded me of something. And saying some reason isn't really appropriate, as I know the reason, and I'm going to explain it right now. Yeah, it was a song by Linkin Park, which thankfully has nothing to do with actual national parks. In fact, I'm not sure what a Linkin Park is. It's probably a place somewhere. But the song in question is called One Step Closer. And there was one particular word that stood out to me, and it's going to be today's topic. Yeah, one word, 2 syllables. Here we go. And in case you didn't understand what he was saying because of the guitar part, here, I'll do it again. That's right, I've sunk to a new low of desperation. Today's topic is literally the word before. Speaking of the word before we actually start this topic, if you're wondering what this thing is, I actually don't know. I got it from Poem, so it's safe to assume it probably does something weird. Here, you can have it. Now, what in particular makes this instance of the word before so much more impactful to me than any other usage of the word before? Well, I can't really pinpoint exactly why, but a pretty decent approximation is, usually when I hear people say before, they say before, not actually pronounce the 2 syllables before, like the singer in the song does. So this stood out to me. Sure, it's a weird thing to stand out, but you've probably assumed by now I'm pretty weird. And since I heard this song on a car radio, it kind of started in the middle of the song, conveniently right on the first, before. And my brain, for the first half second, misinterpreted it as saying before. As in, yeah, you should become the letter 4. But obviously that's not what the lyric meant. And I knew that a half second later, but for that first half second, my brain was like, huh, before. This probably wouldn't have been so jarring if it hadn't been the first time I've heard the word before split up into 2 syllables to better fit the flow of a song. Alright, that must be from a part I didn't hear. But it doesn't have to be the first before. All that matters is that before is included in the song. And more importantly, I misinterpreted before as become the letter 4, which perfectly segues into the thing that it reminded me of. You know that thing it reminded me of? The thing I've been alluding to the whole time? Yeah, I'm very elusive with my allusions. Or is it allulations? Whatever. The thing I'm leading to is the whole mistaking the word before for before reminded me of an audio illusion on the show Brain Games, which was a National Geographic show about optical and audio illusions, obviously. Very good. I definitely recommend watching it. But there was this one audio illusion where there was a voice saying the word bill a whole bunch of times. Bill, 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 bill. And it would show different pictures of bills, either like dollar bills or duck bills. And the words matched up with the images. However, then it started showing pictures of other things. And the trick that was supposed to happen was your brain would confuse the word bill with what was being shown. The reason was because of your eyes and ears conflicting information, and so it just chooses eyes over ears, which is some pretty rude favoritism, but whatever, brain. And as soon as I heard the word before pronounced like that on the song, I knew if I can confuse it with become 4, then why not recreate that Brain Games bill illusion? To both finally wrap up this point that I've been trying to make for the past 2 minutes, which really wasn't completely necessary with the Linkin Park thing. I could have just used the word before, pronounced syllabolically, but, might as well cite my sources. This will also give a better demonstration of the illusion than my explanation, which I'm sure some of you might not have gotten. Which is understandable. I'm not the best at explaining things, even though it's pretty much all I do. So without further ado, B4, Linkin Park meets National Geographic. Oh man, this really definitely was my weirdest idea for a rant. What, that's it? You see, the audio and the visuals, they more or less matched up, but before was pronounced and spelled out a different way each time. You're just lucky I didn't go into mayonnaise territory, which is, it's a reference to the actual Brain Games experiment, which you didn't see, so you don't understand the reference. So now I just said mayonnaise territory for no reason. Alright, let's just stop this right here. It worked better in my head, okay? This has been Billy Not Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Sitcoms. Yeah, that's right. Today we're skipping the part where I allude to the subject for like a minute and a half before actually getting to it. Sitcoms, that's the subject. Because I find it to be one of the strangest genres of entertainment. Because it's really hard to define. So I guess if I'm going to work on defining it, I'm going to have to understand what the name actually means. Well, the word sitcom is obviously a portmanteau. Or you could also call it a portmanteau. Yeah, you like that? It's a portmanteau of portmanteau and portmanteau. A portmanteau of which being a combination of two words that have their syllables combined together to make one word. So we have sit and com. Com being the easiest of the two parts to decipher, as there aren't really a whole lot of words that starts with com that are pronounced like com. It could stand for communications, because sometimes words that were created a long time ago used primitive language like that, so they might have described a television as like communication. It could also mean competition, because maybe at the time of the word sitcom's creation, there were a lot of sitcoms, so there might have been some competition. But the real answer is probably the most obvious out of those two made-up examples, because the com stands for comedy, and usually entertainment and comedy are synonymous with each other, depending on the genre, which, if the genre is sitcom, then sure, yep. And thankfully the word synonymous is not a portmanteau of sin and anonymous, because that sounds pretty, sketchy. But what about the sit part? Well, that's a bit more complicated, and I had the wrong idea about the sit part for a while. I used to think that the sit part was not actually a contribution to the portmanteau, but rather just stating the fact that while you're watching this particular program, you would most likely be sitting down. But then again, that's kind of a strange reason to call it a sitcom for two reasons. Number one, you're usually sitting down when you watch most shows, unless you're on like an exercise bike and watching it on your phone. And two, if the sit part was not contributing to the portmanteau, then now we have a Frankenstein's monster of grammar, where the first part is referring to something, and the second part is a portmanteau, and then it's just attached to the first part, so the first part kind of second-handedly gets portmanteaued as well, though not in the traditional sense. So yes, looking back on it, thinking that the sit part of sitcom was actually sitting is pretty ridiculous. But the actual sit part, the actual meaning of the sit part, is probably worse, because the sit in sitcom apparently stands for situational. So the full meaning of the genre is situational comedy. That's way too broad a definition for one genre. How does that make any sense? Most comedy. In fact, no. I can't think of a single comedy where there's no situation. What does that even mean? All comedy has situation. The situation is part of comedy. So according to this official sitcom definition, if you've ever told a joke while being in a situation, I'm sorry to break this news to you, but your life is a sitcom, apparently. Yeah, boot up any show you want. Find a joke. And if that joke just happens to be told in a situation, I'm sorry to say it, but you've been watching a sitcom. You didn't even know it, but apparently it's legally classified as one now. Here's a fun experiment to do. Go to the bottom of the SpongeBob page on Wikipedia and look at the definitions. Look at all the genres or whatever. Yeah, right there in the category section. Animated children's television sitcom. It says it right there. This is probably why teachers say to not use Wikipedia as a source. Because really, SpongeBob, a sitcom? You have the nerve to show a line of text in front of me that says SpongeBob Rectangular Prism Pants is a sitcom. Ah, George, you've really done it this time. You've got to embarrass yourself in front of SpongeBob. No. Why does the definition of sitcom not include a family-type dynamic? Isn't that one of the things that makes sitcoms, sitcoms? Couldn't the sit part be changed to sat to stand for, like, satirical comedy or something? That would kind of narrow it down a bit, wouldn't it? I mean, come on here. If we're going off the fact that a sitcom is just comedy taking place in a situation, then flippin' flipper, I'm a sitcom. A few days ago, the subject on the pedestal, if you will, was the National Geographic show Brain Games. A show I would definitely recommend, because if you share any common interest with me, then you'll most likely like it. But just because I like something doesn't mean it doesn't have some silly stuff to discuss about. Though it's not the thing I want to talk about right now, Season 8 is sort of a weird thing, because there's nothing new in that season. It's all the Brain Games you've seen before, but now they're just doing it with celebrities, and like with a different host. So it's like, why does that season exist? There's one episode in Season 8 called Jack Black, music. And so it's just Jack Black reacting to all the audio illusions we've seen before, with some new things thrown in, but they aren't that interesting. For example, for one of the new illusions, Jack Black was asked to think of a random song and write it down on a board. And then a bunch of people from the audience, because apparently Brain Games is now filmed in front of a live studio audience, but that's just a Season 8 thing. I think they had less of a budget, so they couldn't do all this, like, editing and stuff. And so he writes down the song, and then everyone in the audience, they all get a bowl, and they fill it with, like, water. So now there's a bunch of bowls with water. And the illusionist guy, he's like, alright, I'm going to play the song that you chose. And so he shows the song to the illusionist, and then the illusionist just hits the bottles to the tune of the song. And he's like, whoa, it sounds just like the song he chose. But yeah, of course it sounds like the song he chose. You hit the bottles to the rhythm of the song he chose. What's the illusion here? Am I not getting something? Maybe this would have worked if the illusionist hadn't known the song that was chosen before playing, and it just so happened that out of all these bottle combinations, the water just happened to play the right tune. That would be impressive. But no, he already knew the song before playing it. But you could be thinking, hey, maybe the illusionist guy, he doesn't know how the song goes. Well, that's also impossible because Jack Black sung it in front of him before doing the illusion. So, what's the point? Where's the illusion? But we're not here to talk about Season 8. We're here to talk about an episode in Season 5, which was about, like, morality or decision-making or something along those lines. And that episode features a pretty well-known thought experiment, or no, I guess it would be a hypothetical situation. It's the trolley problem, which, in Brain Game's case, they use trains. But basically the way it works is that there's a train approaching, and there's split tracks with 2 people on the tracks. There's 4 people on one track, and there's 1 person on the other track. And the decision is, would you divert the train to hit the 1 person, or do nothing and let the train hit the 4 people? And so the Brain Games host guy, he goes around the park, and he asks all the people, hey, he just asked the same thing I just told you. And they usually will say that they divert the tracks to hit 1 person, because that's hitting 3 less people than it otherwise would have hit. But then for part 2 of the experiment, he changes around the question. But before we get to that, let's talk about the actual vanilla train problem, trolley problem, whatever the heck you want to call it, question thing. The main problem with this problem, that's causing a problem for the people on the tracks, is that their problem is they're going to get hit by the train because they don't hear it coming. So I'm assuming they have, like, those ear muffy thingies, because they're using, like, jackhammers or something to repair the train tracks. I don't know. But for this question, it's assumed that they can't hear the train coming. Why are they using jackhammers? Well, Brain Games host guy specifically states that they're construction workers on the track. I don't think the vanilla trolley problem actually addresses what profession the train people have, but it's okay. They're construction workers now, so we're assuming they can't hear. But riddle me this. There's a humongous train coming, like multiple tons of steel going choka 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 choka. And it's vibrating the tracks, obviously, because the railroad, like, tracks and the metal wheels of the train, they're, like, vibrating against each other. So it's causing sort of a ruckus, which for some reason is cancelled out by their ear muffy things. But how come they can't feel the train coming? They're laying there right there on the tracks, doing their construction work, probably with their hands on the actual train support bar things. How are they not feeling the train coming and moving out of the way? And why is the train even coming in the first place if this is like maintenance day? All those questions aside, though, here's what part 2 of the Brain Games train trolley experiment thingy is. Same situation as before, a train's coming, and it's going to hit some people. But this time, you can't divert the tracks. Instead, in this hypothetical, you are standing on a bridge, and in front of you is a person. And the question now is, would you push that person off the bridge to stop the train? Now, I can see where they were going with this. This has the groundworks to be a thought-provoking experiment. Because now, instead of remotely causing the train to hit someone else, you are physically, manually putting this other person in danger to save other people. So it's like a lot more morally taxing. So they're expecting pushing this person onto the tracks is going to stop the train. No, pushing someone on the tracks is not going to stop the train. Instead, the train's going to kill 5 people instead of 4. And this entire second part of the experiment is really stupid. And the Brain Games people must have known how ridiculous this was, because they specifically specified in the question that the person that's being pushed is really fat, which is extremely rude. And also, it doesn't matter how big that person is. They could be Jabba the Hutt. Who cares? No living creature, except maybe like an elephant, is big enough to stop a train, especially when they aren't even prepared to stop a train. They're just being pushed, like, whoop, I guess I'm on the floor now. Hopefully I can stop this train. And if the train somehow is stopped, instead of putting those 4 people on the tracks in danger, now you've killed someone with a train, and the train's probably derailed if it stopped, right? So you're putting even more people in the danger than if you had just done nothing. And if the thing that you're pushing, or person, or whatever, it would make more sense if you were pushing just like a heavy object onto the tracks, because that would make more sense to try to stop a train. But if this thing's so heavy it can stop a train, you really think I can push it? No, probably not. If I were in this situation, the best thing to do is just call the emergency number and hope that the people on the tracks heard the train coming so they get out of the way. Because this is about to turn into a crime scene, and you don't want your fingerprints all over the person who just got hit on the train. Yeah, crime scenes, they're like styrofoam. You don't want to touch it, because then all sorts of bad things will happen. In the case of styrofoam, it'll make a really annoying noise. Styrofoam is the worst. It's like a horrible substance. It's not biodegradable, it hurts the environment, and it makes horrible sounds when you touch it. And hopefully you're not splitting it, because actually splitting it, it usually doesn't leave a clean cut, and it gets like dust everywhere. Dust, like, if packing peanuts are the styrofoam peanuts, then styrofoam would be the shell that's around the peanuts. And all that little dust that happens when you split styrofoam, that would be like the brown skins of the peanuts just peeling off all over the floor. It's just a horrible substance. At least other things that aren't biodegradable and really annoying, like glitter, at least those look pretty. Styrofoam doesn't look pretty. It's just a stupid white block that you use once and then just throw it away. While there is biodegradable glitter, I'm not so sure there is biodegradable styrofoam. So here's a good idea. How about instead of using styrofoam, because it stinks, you use cardboard and then just form those into triangular trusses. Because triangles are pretty strong. Triangles will get you where you want to go, pretty much. So how come more people aren't doing that, instead going to styrofoam? Is it because it's cheaper? Well, I don't know about you, but these trees are everywhere. Trees turn into cardboard. I don't see why those would be so expensive. And if you keep using styrofoam, the trees are only get more expensive because there's going to be less trees. Because the styrofoam, it's going to get rid of the trees because it's gonna like go in a turtle or something. I don't know. But anyway, this has been Billy Nutshell's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Today is September 5th. That means it's Labor Day. What is Labor Day? Well, I know two definitions for the word labor. But let's just start with the right definition. Labor means work. So today is a day to celebrate work. If you are watching this right now, you have done work before. It's completely unavoidable. By the time you're born, you would have already had done some sort of work. So it's pretty much impossible to have not done work. So Labor Day is a day for everyone. But more importantly, it's for actual, like, workers, I guess. People who do work that helps other people, or helps other people help other people, or that just contributes something. How ironic that Labor Day marks the start of school, or around the start of school. So as if it's saying, get back to work. You've had your fun. Now it's time to get back to doing, like, bar graphs, or whatever school things occur. Speaking of fun, today's topic is actually going to be about a specific job. Or a labor, I guess. But before we get into that, have you ever watched a movie? I'm asking this because watching a movie is not necessarily as universal an experience as being born. Yeah, watching a movie. Movie in itself is a pretty strange word if you think about its actual implications. But, yeah, watching movies. Everyone's done it, most likely. And if you've never watched a movie before, well, never fear. Look what you're doing right now. Or, actually, maybe this isn't a movie, this is more of a stiffy. Anyway, the one specific movie that I'd like to highlight for my little filmmakers highlight segment, I guess, is going to be Terminator 2, Judgment Day. A pretty cool title, because of the fact that no matter which way you pronounce 2, unless it's T-O-O, the title makes sense. It could either be Terminator 2, Judgment Day, or it could be Terminator 2, Judgment Day, because he's kind of, like, going to Judgment Day. I'm choosing to talk about that movie in particular because I've actually seen the behind-the-scenes sort of stuff, and I appreciate the work that went into it. The reason why the movie is given the subtitle Judgment Day is because in the movie, an evil computer, it wants to set off a bunch of nukes so it can destroy half the population of Earth, because I guess destroying all the population of Earth was too much work. So instead, it's just going to destroy half the population and then send like a bunch of robot skeleton guys to get rid of the rest. Seems pretty impractical. And also in the movie, it does kind of show the nukes going off in a pretty crazy scene. And now, I've never seen Los Angeles be evaporated, but if I had, it would probably look like that. It's a pretty darn realistic looking scene. And I'm sure everyone who's seen the scene was thinking, man, how'd they do that? How'd they do such a realistic looking scene in like 1990 something? Wouldn't you need like a whole bunch of computers to do that? In the case of the nuke scene, no, they did not use computers for that scene, because that would be pandering to the enemy. You don't want to show off a scene of an evil computer destroying a city while making the scene with a computer. That's super hypocritical. The word for making a movie scene without using special effects is called practical effects. A pretty ironic name considering that they aren't very practical, and in fact, are usually more difficult to do than computer graphics, depending on the situation. So that's why more and more people who are making movies started using computer graphics after the computers got good enough to start doing those kind of graphics. But of course, practicality has always been there, so no matter how old a movie is, it'll probably have some sort of practical effect in it. But that still doesn't answer the question of how they did the scene. Alright, so they didn't use computers. So what'd they do? Build an actual city and then blow it up? Well, yes and no. Apparently what they actually did was they built a little, corner of a city. But not an actual life-size city, of course. That wouldn't be very practical for this practical effect. What they did was make it, the building's about person size. So not super small, but not super big either. Like a little city. A little tiny city. And then they took a whole bunch of fans and then just blew that thing away. And of course with computer graphics, if you want to reshoot a scene, all you have to do is press the reset stage button, and everything just goes back to where it was before. But with a super big practical effect like this, you only get one shot. Once that city's blown away, it's blown away, unless you want to build a whole new one. So I'm sure they made sure all the cameras were working, a whole lot of times. A lot of times. That would be pretty stressful to only have one chance to get a scene done. If you had $1 for every time they made sure that something was going to work for that one scene, you would probably have enough money to make your own exploding nuke scene. And then every time you check the cameras on your own scene, you can give more money to start another nuke scene. And that's how Skynet got enough money for all the nukes. Jokes aside though, there were a lot more practical effects throughout the movie, such as the actual titular character, the Terminator. I mean, after all, he is a big skeleton robot dude, so of course that's going to take some practical effects. While the mini Terminators in the dystopian future scenes, those were made with stop motion, which is a sort of practical effect, but it's also mostly digital, so I don't think that really counts. The main character Terminator, of course, does involve some practical effects. That's because the main character Terminator, he doesn't look like all the others. He's not a skeleton guy. He just looks like the actor who plays him. Which I guess in itself, acting is sort of a practical effect, because you're not a computer. You're a person. So if you're acting, that's kind of a practical effect, right? And the movie actually does give a reason to why this main character Terminator doesn't look like all the others. And I'm pretty sure the reason in the movie was that he needed to time travel from the future back to the past, but I think for some reason time travel doesn't allow non-organic material, so the robot was covered in, organic material, so it's just, in a human disguise, which for some reason fooled the time travel thing. I don't know if time travel didn't have a metal detector on hand. It's sort of a ridiculous reason. But of course time travel is very complicated, and when you're making a fictional time travel scenario, sometimes less is more. We don't really need a super complicated look of how time travel works. Wouldn't it just make more sense to say, if you were a robot going on a low-profile mission, wouldn't you want to look like just another normal person, and not a giant skeleton? It would attract a lot less attention. And since this movie is a sequel, and really needs to step up from the original source material, the main character Terminator, the T-800, he's not the Terminatorist Terminator on the block anymore. There's a new guy, called the T-1000. So that's 200 more T's than the other guy had. So of course he's a big improvement. And his main ability, instead of being a skeleton guy, he can turn to goop and reform himself. Goop Man. And next to the nuclear part, and the stop motion that went into the mini Terminators, I think Goop Man is also one of the major highlights of this movie's special effects repertoire. Because Goop Man was made with computer animation. But of course, since this movie's special effects just can't stop being so awesome, not only was it made with digital animation, but there were also some live-action puppets that were made to look like the actor, so when the goop and the actual dude part of the robot were on screen at the same time, they could both be shown. And I'm not so sure how I would feel if I were the actor of Goop Man, just knowing that somewhere out there, someone has your head. Strange. Now the first Terminator movie introduced this super solid robot, solid physically, that's basically bulletproof, and the second movie introduces the Goop Man robot, who can turn into a solid. And I haven't seen the third movie, but I'm hoping that in the third movie, the new Terminator can turn into air, and then it starts time traveling and stuff, just like all the others do. Yeah, time traveling oxygen. That would make a pretty good movie. Terminator 3, a breath of fresh air. Dun 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 dun. Anyway, next time you watch a movie, I hope you'll just take a few moments to appreciate all the effort that went into it. As for now, this has been Billy Netchell's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Oh, hi, Tenerbot.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. Why are you here?
Why are any of us here? Who knows for sure? As the meaning to life is hidden from those who live it themselves. Not just kidding. The reason I'm here is to stand here 'cause I have nothing better to do.
Oh, how poetic. That's a fun word, isn't it? Poetic. Poetic, poetic, poetic. to become poetic.
Stop talking about poetic. What's your real topic, you creature?
I actually didn't really prepare a topic today, because preparing a topic is fun, and I wouldn't want Jelly to miss out on any fun since he's not here today. But let's see. You're a robot, future, space, Star Wars, Jedi, lightsaber. Yeah, let's talk about lightsabers. Now, I'm not all caught up on the Star Wars cryptology, which, if you're wondering, is a portmanteau of mythology and cryptic, but I think I know how a lightsaber works. And I think the way it works is, in fact, that it's a metal stick with like a magic crystal in the middle that shoots a laser that somehow only goes for like a few feet and then stops existing. The lightsaber in and of itself, which is another fun expression to say, in and of itself. It requires like a whole analysis to understand what's happening, but if you just say in and of itself, it's like, sure, I know what you mean. Anyway, the lightsaber in and of itself is a really, really dangerous weapon. One small touch to the laser part, and you're really burnt. I'm not talking third-degree burn. I'm not talking second or first-degree burns, which you don't hear about as much as third-degree burns, probably because they're not nearly as burning. But I'm sure lightsabers cause like a 3 3/4 of a burn, so like a little worse than being on fire. But you'll most likely be dismembered, so that's a positive, I think. And what really bugs me is that the actual people in the movies who use the lightsabers, they barely seem to acknowledge just how lethal of a weapon it is. Luke Skywalker's just haphazardly swinging around the lightsaber when he first gets it. It takes another like hour for him to lose his hand, which just immediately gets replaced by an identical hand, but still, you would have thought it would happen like an hour earlier because of how carelessly he's using this darn thing.
Really? You're against lightsabers? I thought you'd love them, on account of all the pretty colors, as you'd say.
Well, yeah, of course, I do like pretty colors, but the actual light part of the lightsabers is pretty spooky, and sometimes even incredibly moronically designed. For example, Kylo Ren's lightsaber, which you've probably seen, because he's like in the newer movies, it has those two little extendy lightsaber parts at the sides, which is to make the lightsaber look more like, a saber. But what purpose do those two little light parts serve, other than to accidentally cut off your fingers? Do they serve any purpose in combat? No. Do they serve any purpose for looking cool? Yes, but I'd rather look lame and have all my fingers. And this isn't even a recent development. In the older movies, there were also some unique lightsabers that were pretty dumb. Although, in this example's case, they were a bit more practical than Kylo Ren's. For example, Darth Maul's lightsaber has a sword side on one side and a sword side on the other side, to quote myself. And so that means he can do epic spinny maneuvers, which is pretty cool. However, while doing such epic spinny maneuvers, you better make sure not to cut yourself in half. That would be quite unfortunate if Darth Maul were to cut himself in half. Like, I remember one scene in his, only fight scene in the entire movie, and entire existence, pretty much, where he falls, a really good distance with his lightsaber extended, and then I think he falls on his back, with his lightsaber just, kind of resting there, as if it wasn't made of super hot lasers, and I'm just thinking, no way he would have survived that. He would have killed himself with his own lightsaber on accident. And also, I think any lightsaber fight scene between two people with lightsabers can be criticized for its inaccuracies, as light is made of light. And as the lightsaber's name implies, the laser thing is light, and thus doesn't have mass, and really doesn't interact with things, unless it's burning them. So when there's two people clashing lightsabers together with, the bzz sounds, I don't think that would happen. I think the lightsabers would just go between each other, and they'd both hit each other. So, doesn't seem like there's much skill involved, just hit first. But out of all the special and unique lightsaber designs, there's one that stands out in particular to me as the absolute worst. And it's not even from a Star Wars movie. So technically it's not even really a lightsaber, but it's the same general idea. The thing I'm alluding to is the Crucible from Doom Eternal, which is pretty much exactly the same thing as a lightsaber. It's a metal stick that shoots a laser beam powered by crystals.
I qualify as 1/3 of a lightsaber in that case.
The word crucible means container for hot thing. So I guess the actual hilt of the crucible is the crucible, and the laser is just the laser part. And even though I said the Crucible from Doom Eternal, I'm not actually going to be talking about the Crucible from Doom Eternal, because I recently already did sort of touch on Doom Eternal as a subject. And also because the design in Doom Eternal isn't bad. In fact, most would say it's pretty cool. However, its design in the previous game, which it only shows up in one cutscene, but still, looks completely different from the actual finished Crucible sword. And it looks really silly. Alright, I'll give you a few seconds to take a look at the actual weapon itself, and see if you notice anything a little unusual, something a little wrong, Something maybe that shouldn't be there. Something maybe the laser part is going right through the handle. How are you supposed to hold this thing? Sure, you could bring up the fact that in-game, maybe the Crucible, since it's like a magical artifact, wasn't designed for humans to hold. Well, in that case, it's built like a human sword, but with such a small handle, with so little margin of error, that you'll just end up hurting yourself if you hold it not the perfect way. Was this made for a creature whose hand just happened to be that small? Maybe the people who are animating this cutscene accidentally misplaced the blade, accidentally misaligned it so it's a little too far down. Because in Doom Eternal, they act as if this design flaw never even happened. The Crucibles always looked like that. Of course, that's the Crucible I know, all safe and not finger-cutty. Thankfully, the actual usable Crucible in Doom Eternal fixes all the strange design flaws of the original, and even gets rid of that weird artifact look, and just goes for a more traditional sword thing. A traditional sword that runs out of battery every 3 swings, but a traditional sword nonetheless. That observation actually does remind me of another observation I've made, where one of the most integral parts of the Doom games, the chainsaw, really doesn't make any sense. You can leave the chainsaw in your hand idling all day, just spinning around, not cutting anything, and it never runs out of gas. But cut through one monster, and it can take upwards of like 3 tanks of gas. Sure, that makes sense. And that's just in Doom Eternal. In the previous Doom game before that, the one with the weird crucible, the chainsaw is even weirder. I think it can take upwards of 8 cans of gas to cut through one monster. Do you know how long it takes to drain 8 cans of gas? It must have been cutting through that monster for like a full week. Maybe the chainsaw has some sort of time-traveling capabilities where it just travels you in the future, where you've already used all those cans to cut up the monster. One more crucible observation before we move on. The Doomslayer himself is a pretty strong guy. He can one-hand the most biggest weapons you've ever seen. But for some reason, the crucible, this little piece of iron with a laser sword, and keep in mind lasers don't really weigh anything, his actual swinging animation for the sword makes it look like he's lugging around the heaviest object in the universe, which the actual handle part might be super dense, and it actually is really heavy and lopsided, but I think he would be swinging this thing with a bit more confidence. Who knows, maybe the 3 limit charge thing isn't actually because the Crucible runs out of battery, it's just that the Slayer gets too embarrassed to keep swinging it because he looks like a moron. As a matter of fact, I think that's exactly what happens, because some of the executions with the Crucible take more than 1 swing to finish. So there's no way that the 3 charges is 3 swings. It's really quite a strange thing.
Who are you to judge that guy? You probably couldn't swing that thing either.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm not a super buff space marine.
Obviously, you're just a squishy squirrel.
Oh yeah? Well, you're just a...
What I can't hear can't hurt me, and now you're just talking to thin air.
Yeah, I guess he is kind of right. Anyway, this has been Billy Netchell's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Come on, brain, just let me fall asleep. Tomorrow's a big day, and I need to have all of my brain energy. How hard could it possibly be for a brain to fall asleep? I mean, it seems like it'd be the easiest thing in the world. Just stop being awake, go to sleep, sort memories, and then just display a whole bunch of random images that I'll piece together in my head to form a really bad movie. However, in the moment, it'll feel like the best movie ever, because it's interactive. Kinda. Depends on what happens, really. And of course the brain would think its own movie is the best thing ever. What a narcissist. So come on, brain, if you're gonna make me fall asleep, might as well do it now. I need to go to bed tonight, and it's already 9:26. Alright then, Billy, you're losing time fast. And if your natural squirrel sleepy alarm isn't working, time to take matters into my own hands. I'm no sleep professional, but I'm pretty sure doing a little dance will definitely tire me out. Oh, it didn't work. Now I'm tired in the wrong way. Yeah, that's coughing up phlegm tired, not sleepy tired. It's not a good thing. I wonder if this is my brain subconsciously telling me that I should just do the 200th episode party right now and get it over with. I mean, I suppose it's possible. I just wouldn't have the theater, my friends, microphones, cameras, or clothes. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Who needs clothes? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Which I actually hope I really don't see. That would kind of stink. It means that I wouldn't have fallen asleep at all. I really chose the most demotivational song possible. I'm overthinking this. I'll just read a book. It's weird how when cartoon characters go to read a book, they always start from the middle. And I get it's easier to show that the object they're holding is a book if you start from the middle because you can show paper on both sides. But really, it doesn't make much sense. You could make the argument that maybe the paper at the front is supposed to be like all the copyright pages and like maybe the prologue, maybe skip the prologue, but it's just strange. Also, there's usually some sort of joke on the cover or author, but I guess not right now. Also, what shelf would fit this book? It's so tall. Ever wanted to know my height? Well, I'm about 2 1/4 this book. Oh, that book was not good. In fact, some people might say that book was bad, horrible, atrocious, poorly written, but I don't think it's really fair to judge the book at 10:30 at night. My brain may not be working at 1,000,000,000% mental 1,000,000,000% mental capacity. It's not the book's fault it's bad. It's my bad, the book's but the ball. However, of course, it's very important to recognize that the badness factor of the book may not have actually been a part of my mental slight degradation over the wee hours of the night, but rather the book was actually bad, and me rereading it while completely awake may just be a waste of time rereading a bad book. Though, who's to say for sure? You can't see the title. Holy cow, I just realized my problem. There's no mattress on my bed. How am I supposed to sleep on a bed with no mattress? What am I, a squirrel? Alright, maybe it is possible to sleep on just wood, but I don't wanna. Yeah, I need to find a new mattress. But before I do that, I'm tired, so let's go to bed. I'm done with this. If I have to tire myself out, that's what I'm gonna do. It's handstand time. Because no one's ever not passed out from exhaustion after doing a handstand, yeah? Oh, I agree, Clock. You know, if that were in any other font, I'd probably have to censor it. Alright, let's try a different approach. Let's just have a snack. It's not quite midnight yet, but it's close enough that a midnight snack would thematically make sense. Because I'm sure eating things makes you sleep. And I have things right here to consume, but of course not just raw. I'd be putting them on onto a bread, to form the fine dish known as a sandwich. Yes, indeed, I shall be preparing myself one sandwich. I may have slightly overdone it on the quantity of these sandwiches, which is supposed to be only one sandwich originally, one sand-y, but now I have made multiple sandwiches, and there's a high probability that the quality took a hit in favor of this unfavorable quantity. If we're playing the midnight blame game, well, I have a few candidates. First, and really only, are my excess of ingredients, as I had 2 full jars of both peanut butter and grape slather stuff. Wait, no, it has a real name, not grape slather stuff. It's grape rub. No. Grape smear on jam. Grape smeared jam gelatin jit. Jelly. 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 Of course, that's the answer. How did I not think of that earlier? Hey, you want a sandwich? Though that friendly gesture may have seemed like the reason I called you over here in the middle of the night, or I guess for you, the start of the day, is because I have one simple problem that I think you could help me with. Jelly, I can't sleep. I can't. I've tried for like a few hours, I can't do it. Every time I try to fall asleep, I just keep thinking about all sorts of stuff that I think about normally. You're very capable of things, I know. Just please help me escape this Hieronymus Bosch horrorscape that is my current mind. One thing that I've recently been thinking about is how some words can be split in themselves to become their own opposite. Like, for a few examples, the word immoral. It means not moral, but if you split it between the 2 M's, it goes from being immoral to I'm moral. Same thing kind of for the word disingenuous. It goes from being disingenuous, not genuous, to, if you split it between the S and the second I, it goes to disingenuous, as in, hey, this guy, he's ingenuous. Isn't that great? Same thing with the word asexual, meaning that the act in and of itself of mitosis is quite hypocritical. That's my opinion on it. But of course, my mind is not all just on grammar stuff. Sometimes it's about things I observe, such as you, my best friend. I observe you quite often, and I've noticed that your eyeshadow thing, it's basically impossible to know if it's actually black or if it's just so dark gray that nobody on the face of the earth is able to identify it as anything other than dark gray, even though it may not be completely black. And, speaking of you, it seems that you've been telling me I should stop talking aloud all my thoughts and then just relax and go to bed. Am I getting that right? Oh, silly me. How did I not think of that? All I have to do is relax and stop worrying myself with worrying things. Thank you so much. I think I'm actually going to try this new sleeping strategy right now. You want to watch me fall asleep? Is that why you're still, okay, no. I'm sorry for even thinking that. That's, no, weird. Good night. Ah, the sweet, dark and bitter cover of darkness. It's beautiful. Who knows? Maybe with all that stuff out of my mind, I can think of things that actually bring me joy. Like that funny little guitar riff. The one that goes, doo 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 doo. Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. Ah, that would be the dream, wouldn't it? Good night.